Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Omnia Performance Podcast with myself, Fergus Crawley.
And myself, Big Jonny Payne. That was actually for someone. When in the first episode, if we go right back to the first episode, apparently I introduced myself as Big Jonny Payne. I don't know why I would have done that, or what was going through my mind. I probably got nervous and excited.
Probably some sort of body dysmorphic.
But I promised to do it again.
Looked yourself in the mirror and felt small, so had to tell everybody how massive you were.
Something bad happened.
Okay,
and something bad has happened again. So
identity crisis, everyone.
Big
Hello,
Jonny Payne.
welcome to myself and Small Johnny Payne's podcast episode number something, and we are going to explore the 10 things that we have taken away from 2022 that we'll be carrying into this year. I know we're sort of past the new year, but let's just look at the previous 12 months as the sort of cycle of reflections for this. So we're gonna do 5 each. We're gonna pass the baton back and forth and share our reflections with you. But before we do that, usual podcasty stuff. Hit follow/subscribe. Check us out on YouTube. Check out Omni Performance Premium. Rate and review the show. Subscribe to the email list. Go to the website, check out the products and services. Thank you very much. Cheers. Nice. Cool. Yeah, sick. Cheers. That's pretty much it, isn't it? That's the intro. Yeah. Okay, right, cool. Let's dive straight in. No waffle. There's been enough waffle already, and we're not here. I mean, we might be a minute in. It could be hours at this point.
The fact that we are going to do this from our own hearts, authentically, and without scripted sort of understanding, I think there might be waffle. Is what I'm trying to say.
Oh no, this is dangerous territory. Yeah. No, there will be waffle, but there's no point in waffling before the waffle.
Oh, I see. Okay.
As we are now
So no
doing.
more
So
pre-waffle
let's go.
waffle.
Johnny. Big Johnny. Big Johnny Payne.
Big Jonny Payne, huh? What is that?
First lesson from the past 12 months. Go.
Don't over-egg yourself size-wise to your community or other half. Actually, when we sat down, I was kind of wondering what to talk about. And one of the things that I have learned a couple of times quite well, and probably, I don't know if it's fully cemented in yet, is don't second guess yourself too much.
Because you are massive. Sorry, no, I'm just going to drop this.
I am
now.
Big
Sorry.
Jonny Payne.
I was still sniggering about the fact you just told everyone you have a small penis on audio file.
No, I don't think I did that.
I was hoping
I just hinted at it. I didn't directly say it.
I hope this is rated explicit already on Apple Podcast,
If
because
it wasn't, it is now.
we'll get flagged if not. Sorry, you were saying don't second guess yourself.
Yeah.
And we won't second guess one another as we speak now.
Yeah,
We're done.
don't
We're done.
worry
Our
about it.
shenanigans are over.
You are who you are, and you have what you have. That's it. Let's just draw a line under that. It'd be a small line. Right. So, yeah, don't second guess yourself. The reason I thought of that, we were flicking through kind of previous episodes, thinking, what have we discussed? What's been topics of that we've enjoyed, and what's been kind of top of the list? And I kind of flicked past our conversation about the Dinny Stones just a moment ago, and then there's sort of recent thought processes going on with some big things going on for me, and the biggest successes I've had, or the most startlingly apparent successes to me, have happened just during moments where I have thought I couldn't do it. So the Dinny Stones, if you remember, you'll remember in particular, but anybody listening will remember, is that although I had trained for it, it would be unfair to you and your training to suggest that I hadn't, but I hadn't really believed, even from the start when we were doing a little bit of lifting together and I was getting involved with the process that you were going through, that I could lift them. I was kind of like, well, if I fail, it doesn't matter, because I haven't fully really entered into this process. If I don't fully commit myself to it and then fail, then it's okay, because I never fully commit myself. There's a sort of I've left the door wide open to say, well, I was never all the way in. How could I fail? And on the day, it was only circumstance really that forced me to go through with it, because we had a line of 4 guys waiting to lift the stones. You went first, and I had already sort of decided, I'll go fourth, buying myself more time not to go, essentially. But then the last guy that was going to go was he left-handed, or he just wanted to stand the other way, which meant we had to turn the stones, essentially.
So
So I was forced, well, you go now, Johnny, so that we don't have to make arrangements back.
Yeah, well, it wasn't a question either, was it? It was a Johnny, you're up.
You're up, yeah. Oh shit! So by the time I realised I was up, I was kind of marching towards the stones. Too late to say to anybody, "Listen, I've decided I'm not doing it," and lifted them. And not only did they come up successfully, they came up well, didn't they? and I've dined out on that ever since. But no, they did come up well, and in that moment afterwards, I was elated, excited. It had been a long held ambition of mine to lift those stones, but what was just as exciting for me was to kind of beat that almost apathy would be the wrong word, but that leaning into fear that I was doing in the wrong direction without leaning into it and taking the power from it. I was leaning into it and allowing it to sort of wash over, and then I was going to use it as an excuse. And then most recently, just weeks ago, I was really quite ill over Christmas and New Year, and I'm training hard at the moment and have been very concerned about my ability to perform after having been ill. How far did that push me backwards, etc. And I got kind of very caught up in a very negative cycle of thought. And then when I got back out training, not only had I not lost much, but within a week I was actually pushing beyond where I had been before. So again, just getting stuck in, not questioning myself, allowing myself to believe in myself as opposed to second guessing things with enough injection of reality not to become insane about it. But I think the lesson I'm learning from that is to bet more on myself. I don't think anybody would claim that nor would I, that I bet against myself much. But when I do, it seems that I'm wrong. so always bet on red or whatever. Black, I suppose. Always bet on black.
You should bet that you aren't going to find £1 million.
Yeah, that's it. I bet. I was going to go back to our original discussion.
No, that's done. That's over.
I bet it's bigger than you thought. Damn it.
You're a child.
Damn it.
You're a middle-aged child.
Nobody's denying that.
No.
Right, you go. Wee man.
I thought you were going to burst out laughing while sipping your coffee there. Sorry for the long pause, everyone, but I just had to see how that one pan out. Anyway, what is my first lesson from the past 12 months? I think it is that progress is more important than perfection. And that is something that I think applies to us all, but I think it was really reinforced to me with my prep for the double, because week on week around managing businesses, general existence, some semblance of sanity around 28 to 30 hours of training, sometimes it was actually nigh on impossible for me to structure my week enough to be able to get all the training done, which then meant that I felt like I was cutting sessions short, I wasn't putting in all the effort, I was missing things that I should be doing, I wasn't working hard enough, when in reality I was still making forward progress week on week. And whilst in my head we had this plan that was set, it was based on the premise of forward motion, moving average, moving forwards. And there is no such thing as perfect within that context. So to kick myself for feeling like I'd compromised on the sort of training execution or compromised on other things elsewhere due to the training volume, if I'd actually just looked at it from the top down, I would have realized I was making progress and was moving towards the end goal. Was it as quickly as I humanly possibly could have done? No. Was it as quickly as I humanly possibly could do within the circumstances that were available to me? Yes. So therefore, why kick myself over not being able to make a session work to the best of my ability in circumstances that wouldn't have allowed for it in the first place? And that was me structuring my existence as effectively and strategically as I could. And there were just only so many gaps and only so many psychological moments that I could really apply myself, and then it was difficult to actually switch off. So unique example, because not everybody's going to be in the position where they're doing 30 hours of training a week, but I think for me it was having faith that when I turned up to the start line I felt ready, even though I hadn't done everything along the way to the I's and the dotted I's and the crossed T's. It was very much, it goes back to the message that consistency is more important than that individual session that day. And continually showing up is more important than paralysis by analysis, constantly reassessing and looking at the program and thinking, oh, well, if I adjust this by 5% there and then restructure this and then do that, I'll start that from next week. I'll give this a go for next week. 2 weeks later, then back to the drawing board thinking you need to change things. Essentially, consistency and forward motion, moving average forwards is what matters more than looking for the perfect, the ideal, because external factors will always get in the way of that. Mm-hmm. So that was reinforced to me last year, and it's something that I'm hyper aware of this year.
That was a good lesson for both of us, I think, from coaching and athlete perspective.
So here's the baton.
Thank you. The idea of looking after the pennies and the pounds that will look after themselves, for me, has become, I'll contextualise that in a moment. That's something you've heard before, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Just don't know where you're going with this.
Well, It's not dissimilar to what you've just said. In actual fact, is that and not dissimilar to the last lesson I described. Is that I have a tendency to kind of look at it all from a kind of a high up level and see it all as being very big, and then think, well, which way am I going to attack this? God, it's going to fucking overwhelm me, or you know, what I'm kind of trying to say is that something I'm still learning to do, and we've had a bit of a good strategy meeting today, you and I, in actual fact, where we're kind of looking at ways to do this, is that if you cover off the smaller day-to-day jobs, like the continuity, like the making sure that you're available for X, Y, and Z, then just crossing those T's and dotting those I's will actually make the sentence afterwards. Is that not maybe a weird way of...
Yeah.
Mixed metaphors for sure, but I think if there has been a lesson that I have needed to learn and have been learning this past year and ongoing into 22 into 23, it's to make sure that when turning up that I'm not overthinking the bigger picture and just get the little jobs done. If you do all the little jobs one after the other, look after the pennies, the pounds will look after themselves. And you don't need to be overwhelmed by the big things because you're just chewing it down bite-sized. It's a similar lesson, really. And I think all of our lessons probably kind of have that. Don't get sucked into the wrong way of looking at it. Don't stop looking at the wood. There's the
One step at a time
Yeah.
is essentially the premise here, isn't it?
Yeah, it is.
Don't think about how far you need to. Don't think about running 100 miles. Think about running
That's
1 mile.
that's a great way to put it. Yeah, it's probably better than the pounds and pennies because it's and that is actually a very practical problem I'm having at the moment. Is again, and I'm not being overwhelmed by that in particular, but you can let yourself be overwhelmed by it, and that's a great example, mate. Is that, you know, I've got 250 miles to run. That's massive. I actually can't do that, but I can run 1 mile. You know, and after that mile, I can run another one. You know, and if I think about it that way, it's very, very manageable. And that applies to probably everything that we're doing. Still learning though.
Always, always a student in Snape voice. Always. That wasn't awful.
That's not
Wasn't
terrible.
great.
Not terrible.
Wasn't great. It was a 5.
I won't
Maybe.
try it. It will be awful.
Always, son.
Always. No.
Do you have emphysema? 100 fags a day. Hey, darling. Sorry, headphone users.
Honey.
Oh no, we've degenerated. It's degenerated, Jeremy. Peep show reference for those that don't know, just to save myself. Okay. Wow, this is a mess. We definitely need notes for future reference, don't we? Oh dear.
Lesson number 3 for me. When,
So-
when the baton comes back.
My second lesson is making time to realign with the reason why you started doing things in the first place. Terribly phrased, but for my individual context, training has become a part of my job, whether that's in a marketing, a performance, whatever it is. I started training, started pushing myself to sort of higher level than previously because I enjoyed it and I got a lot from it. And when those parameters started to shift, I realized that I was missing that enjoyment week to week. Essentially, my hobby had turned into something else, which meant that I was therefore missing a hobby. And it took me an awfully long time to realize that. And then when I started actually working in time to go on a really easy run, I just punched the microphone there as well, by the way. Sorry if that was deafeningly loud. But if I made time to go for a real easy run for the sake of going for an easy run, didn't take my Garmin, just sort of trotted about the place. So I went on a real easy bike ride. The Glen Eagles Adventure Race was actually what made me realize this, because it was a partner race. So I spent a lot of time chatting with my partner and moving at a sort of relatively calm pace. And there were moments where I was sort of cycling up ahead and just switched off completely to the environment and didn't worry about data, didn't worry about performance, didn't worry about documenting it too much at all, and very much enjoyed doing so, because that is the reason that I enjoyed training like this in the first place. But sometimes the data, the metrics, the documentation of it can get in the way of that enjoyment. So a big thing for me this year is actually finding a hobby that I enjoy to replace it and keeping it as a hobby, but also being aware that I love the elements of what I do in that training side of things, but it has to be treated like a business, like a job in that sense. So I can't get the joy from it that I once did. And this probably applies in broader terms to maybe those of you that have tried to monetize or tried to develop certain hobbies or interests that you have, or you get excited about a certain project at work that then maybe you end up doing some of the sort of work on that project that you don't enjoy. I don't know, example of big high level thinking strategy work, and you end up being the person that's footnoting the PowerPoint presentation. It's not quite the same. So I think within the context, it's make sure that you check in with the roots of why you enjoyed things in the first place, and sort of reconnect with them, because I lost sight of that with training for a while, and I think it's good for me to work into my calendar long walks without headphones, whether that's with the dogs, without easy runs, time in the hills that isn't for training, it's just for time in the hills, that sort of thing. So that might apply to some of you from a performance point of view as well. But if you're training to something very specific and feel like it's a real head down, crack on, work forwards, and feel like you're missing the sort of day-to-day enjoyment of it, then I think it's important that you try and factor in some time to make the time to enjoy it for what it is, because there's kind of an on and an off switch for the seasonality of a lot of these events. So make sure when the switch is a little bit dimmed down, you make time to YOLO about with a few different things, different movements, different distances, different locations, and remind yourself why you enjoyed the thing in the first place. So I don't know how broadly applicable that is, but that's something that I definitely reflected upon.
Well, yeah, and I have been too, so I'm going to take the baton and then not change much about it, if that's okay. I like it's flippant, and people get offended by it, but I like the nobody cares, work harder kind of thing, only because it makes me giggle for the most part. But there's a strong kind of line of truth runs through that, is that nobody cares. We are in the business of facilitating other people's enjoyment, in the sense that we want to be, certainly that's the premise of what we do essentially, is we want to be there to allow the journey that you might be on to be more seamless. Is that a good way to put it? Or facilitating that opportunity, streamlined, that's good. And some of that comes from our own experience, in the sense that, we want to do these things because they're fun. We want to do these things because they're exciting. They want to do these things because they challenge us. But then there's a moment sometimes where it becomes not fun, and the challenge is just attending to it, And I think that is necessary. I think sometimes within the body of a goal, you're going to find times that are hard, times that are dark, and there's lessons to be learned, and there's a certain fun in overcoming that. But then if that becomes all there is to it, and you just feel like you have to get through it because you've committed to it, or you feel like you have to get through it because you've attached your identity to it somehow, or if all these things that can then become negative, then there has to be a hard reset. There has to be a kind of an ability either to sort of triangulate that evidence with a friend and sit back and say, what do you think? Or to just be brutally honest with yourself and say, do I care? And it sounds so simple, but people get attached to it. And I've been there beforehand, where I've committed to things and gone through the process and hated every minute of it, and then look back and think, well, why would I have done that? Or I've worked with people who have been so caught up in the idea of being the champion at whatever they might be, and they hate the process, they hate the sport, they hate the turning up and all the rest of it. You think, you'd probably be better off if you just took up fishing or did, something else.
Yeah.
So be honest with yourself. Realize that you are the central governor. You are the person that runs your life. You are the person that is most important to make happy, without getting too deeply philosophical about it. If you're not, nobody else around you is likely to be. So you need to make sure that you're aligned with your goals, which kind of goes along with what you were saying to a degree, doesn't it? And if you're not, then realign them, because nobody cares. So you do, and it's important that you do. And then if you do, you might inspire other people to find something that fills them with the same amount of joy. But realign it. So nobody cares, work harder is flippant, but nobody does care, barring you. Other people care, but it's passing. Yeah, they've got their own shit. So love it or fuck it off.
Yeah, the other things I mentioned is nobody cares, which means that nobody's gonna change it for you. Nobody's gonna say, no one's coming, man.
Yeah. You're on your own, man.
That is circulating at the moment. But yeah, essentially, nobody is coming. Nobody cares. It's up to you to make adjustments. And once you accept that reality, it gives you a bit more autonomy.
Yeah.
And freedom.
Yeah, it could be just as simple as, man, just saying, try out. Here's a good example. Triathlon for me. When I was doing it, we're talking circa 2014 through 17 maybe. I didn't like it. Just didn't like it. It wasn't a sport I enjoyed particularly. I love I've really enjoyed the involvement that you've had in it and watching what you're doing. And funny enough, genuinely enjoy coaching it because there's so many different facets to it. But I don't really like being on a bike all that much. I don't really enjoy it that much. I certainly have no love for swimming. But I was doing it because I felt like the position I was in at the time, we were getting a lot of traction with how we were promoting that. There was people that were looking in and looking up, and it did well for the coaching business, and I kept doing it. And I kept it for years, to the point at which I hated it. And I had to look back on that. And then I got injured because I was pushing too hard and I wasn't really monitoring it properly, injured over and over. And then you look back at it and you think, well, why did I do that? That's 3 years I kind of wasted that I could have been doing exactly what I love, because all somebody had to do was say, but what do you actually love, Johnny? Well, I love being in the hills. It's the mountains. Anything else can bollocks, So what have you wasted 3 years doing triathlon for? I have no idea. But I'll not get that back. And not that I have many regrets, and I don't think of that as one, but it's a good example of how you can just get caught up in it.
Just get caught in doing the thing that you're doing because that's
people,
the thing that you do.
Yeah, exactly. And that's the thing that I do. And people were like, they wanted to see blah, blah, blah.
It's the same equivalent as I am going to become a doctor because my parents want me to become a doctor. You're like, well, I mean, there might be some merit in that. There might be some utility in that. But if you don't want to become a doctor, then it's probably not going to...
You might really want to be a circus clown.
Yeah, which is absolutely fine.
That's what I want to do.
Okay, well, juggle for us, boy.
Not that kind of circus clown.
Oh.
I want to be driving a very small car in very big shoes.
With a very small penis.
Squeaking my own nose. Fucking hell.
Sorry, everyone.
Why is this? We have to call it Big Johnny's Small Cock Show. It's not small. From further and further away.
Oh, this is a
It's not even small.
This is a proper example of why white blokes do not need podcasts as a medium right now. This is just a good example of that. Anyway, we are white blokes and we do have a podcast, so let's focus on that rather than anything else that we've mentioned. So another lesson from my end is...
What number are we on now?
This is my third.
Is it?
Yeah.
I feel like we've done about 14 already so far.
No, you've done 3. This is my third,
okay,
to confirm. And I'm trying to... There's lots of things in my head, but I'm trying to make them things that are a bit more broadly applicable, I guess. But I think... This is more general. This isn't that specific to Omnia, but I think masculinity is in crisis. And that is...
Ooh.
Yeah. I think the Andrew Tate manosphere and things that's going online is damaging in some ways. I think there's certain tenets and premises of it that are inherently in and of themselves not wrong, in the sense of hard work and commitment and discipline and things like that. The sort of DNA that runs through it, but the language used is something I flatly disagree with for the most part. But there does seem to be this emerging corner of the internet that is saying that men, to be men, you must do X, Y, Z, earn this, act like that, look like this, do these things. And I think that's created a bit of a disconnect between people, who people feel they are and who people feel they should be. And I feel like we're almost going full circle in terms of back towards the negative association of traditional masculinity, whereas I feel most of the components of traditional masculinity can in no way be deemed toxic, quote unquote, media term, if they are coupled with an emotional awareness. And I think that is what's missing. And that's where this desire from people on the internet, from young blokes, men, to associate themselves with Andrew Tate, these figures on the internet that are filling that gap. I think what's terrifying is the fact that it's been so well received shows how much people need a hero in their day-to-day life. I don't think it's him.
No, it's me. Carry on.
You wish.
I know.
You wish. You need a bigger cock.
You're a hero.
We're actually getting to the point where we might not be able to put this out. So I think we should just probably just be a little bit more considerate of trying to move this forward. But to thank you for ruining the serious point I was making there, Johnny. But essentially, be your own hero. It's kind of something that you've taught me is men are, from my perspective, men are crying out for a hero in the modern world. They're a little bit lost as to what direction they should be going in. There are figures on the internet that are trying to fill that gap. There's figures on the internet that are trying to profit on this uncertainty. But I think that taking your own life by the reins, committing to something that scares you and taking some risks and moving things forward means that you can become your own hero to the point where you don't feel the need to emulate this hypothetical person's ideology from the internet, because the internet is a snapshot of someone's existence. It's a curated version of what they want to see. It's an exaggerated, hyperbolized, and almost caricatured version of what they want to say, which is why there's so much media commentary on what does it mean to be a man, is masculinity, all this stuff. And there will be some people that just feel attacked. And I haven't felt affected by any of this because I've sort of gone through my own evolution of my own masculinity, which means that I sort of know what it means to me, which is have emotional awareness. And then there's nothing wrong with traditional notions of masculinity because you're essentially acknowledging that being vulnerable will make you stronger. It will allow you to work harder. It will allow you to provide better. It will allow you to be stronger physically. It will allow you to commit to more things, take more things on, and be a better version of yourself. But if you try and perpetually do all those things without an emotional awareness, you're just going to wear yourself into the ground. And that's what I did years ago. So I've learnt my lesson the hard way. But I think that there is a need in modern society for people to be their own hero by taking action toward better things. But it would be naive of us to suggest that that isn't the case because it's clearly been demonstrated through social media and the rise of certain figures online that people are crying out for someone to be their representative. And
well, yeah, as you say, it should be their own representative.
Yeah, which is an easy thing to say, but that's where we think the value of committing to some sort of training regime program. We believe in hybrid methodology. Obviously, we're biased, but we think that the range that being in the gym, being out in the open, spending time alone, spending time in harsh conditions, spending time in sociable conditions in a nice, pleasant, warm gym, but then on the flip side, spending time alone for 6 hours in horrendous weather at the weekend, it forces you to confront who you are and reflect on your own version of masculinity, because it's very easy to get lost in the comfort of day-to-day life and be told how you should feel by a device in your hand. And it's an observation of mine rather than a lesson, but I think more people should try and endeavor to be their own hero than to look for heroes elsewhere, because this sounds very, very cynical and very, very nihilistic, but I don't think there's many heroes in this world anymore. Well, I think that there's just two.
I think there is, mate. Here's my take on it. I agree with you.
Nobody is perfect in the way that they are perceived from the outside, because of the facade of the way that people are presented in the modern world is the point that I've made poorly there. But hopefully that makes sense.
No, it does make sense. It does make sense. And I think we've fallen away from the. What were we doing today? It was
well, no, the point was an open discussion. It's what have we taken from the past year? I think, yeah.
I as you know, be your own hero. I have a framed picture that just says "Be your own hero" on my desk at home. It was my knuckles that said "Be your own hero" on them. Were my profile picture for about 10 years, and it's something I firmly believe in. And maybe there's an element of me having been fortunate enough at my age to have kind of straddled the pre-internet and post-internet era, is that the heroes I had growing up were kind of comic books and or people I knew, maybe films. But I had a different interpretation of what made a man and a woman. And those are opinions that are mine, but maybe not for here. But the hero thing, the what are you looking up to, and therefore what are you aspiring to be? What inspires you, etc., has been trampled and dragged around and made different, and it's just a bit of a mess. And I think that's because people are looking far too far out in front of them to see that it could be the dude next to them, or ultimately it should be you, it should be yourself. It's the same as the nobody cares thing, isn't it? What are the tenets of being a good human to you? Well, fucking go and embody them then, day in, day out. And when you fail, which you will, recognize what the failure is and work on it, and then when you fail again, work on that. The whole thing should be a lifetime of polishing, and probably never achieve what you want to achieve. But, I've said to anybody, a flawed man, I'm sure my hero is my old man, my dad. I'd be very, very honored if one of my children thought that I was even half the man he is. And, he's not out there banging any gongs or anything. He's just a dude doing what he does, day-to-day stand-up guy doing what he does. The point of that ramble is to really kind of underline what you're saying, is that it's not for the internet to tell us. It's not for us to kind of find this stuff in social media or media. You have to find it inside. And it's an interesting thing to see happen. Toxic masculinity and all this bollocks is that
Got to put it in quotation marks.
Yeah, because it doesn't really mean anything when you dig into it.
It doesn't. It doesn't. But there are people. There
means,
are people that hear somebody say the phrase and immediately switch off and feel like they're under attack. Which so for anyone listening, because I mean I've seen it in YouTube comments. Even if you use the word and contextualize it and caveat it, people just hear the word and then lose their heads. And that comes from my perspective from a place of being at a loss as to where they fit into this argument. So they feel that their sense of masculinity is under attack, and the word is associated with it. So
yeah, it's a difficult phrase to kind of,
and it means different things to different media outlets. That's it's a non-term in reality, but I think
pin it to anything. It doesn't actually mean anything.
I think
it means what you want it to mean in the moment, which is a behaviour that you've decided is a negative quality that you don't like, and that kind of applies to a broad brushstroke of things that you might deem to be boorish or whatever. I don't know. Just as we don't fall right off this into political argument. I think you and I would agree on all of it, but a political discussion, then I do like your point, and I fully agree. Have I taken the battle and made that mine? I don't think so, but be your own hero. I'm trying to claim that bag. Hashtag be your own hero, Johnny Payne, big Johnny Payne. That's a big hashtag, that one, isn't it?
Yeah. I'd happily buy into that. I'd buy into that. Yeah. No, I would. I think at the very least, off the back of this episode, I think other people would too, if they've come this far. That is, of course. But just a caveat, I think the way I view toxic masculinity, quote unquote, is the way that traditional notions of masculinity can manifest themselves in certain men, if not paired with emotional awareness, can manifest themselves as qualities that can be toxic to the individual, or something along those lines. Yeah, there is nothing inherently toxic about masculinity, and nobody should tell you to not be who you are, your perception of it. But the way that they can manifest themselves, if not coupled with emotional intelligence, awareness, empathy, all the things that some media outlets might be dismissive of. My perception is there's nothing wrong with working hard. There's nothing wrong with trying to move things forwards. There's nothing wrong with wanting to provide for people around you. There's nothing inherently wrong with all these things, but they can manifest themselves wrongly if not paired with the emotional awareness and intelligence that goes with that. And there's no broad brushstroke I can paint here in the same way there's no broad brushstroke that anyone can paint here, which is why I think there's such a crisis of people arguing over what this means and what that means and who they are and what they are and what this should be and what that should be. But I just want to make crystal clear that we don't buy into any sort of conventional. I want to be nuanced because I don't want to piss anyone off, but I want to make clear that my version of masculinity is different to the next person's, and that's okay.
Well, that actually brings you back, though, doesn't it?
Yeah.
To that be your own hero, because
as long as you're not being a dickhead and committing crimes and being horrible to women and being
or men.
It's
DBAC, and we won't say the C. Don't be a it's dead. Just do that. Don't be a prick. Just be right with people, and you know what that is. You don't need a book, an internet celebrity, a guru, a podcast. You don't need any of these things to tell you what right and wrong is. You know, so just do right. Be your own hero, be a stand-up guy, be a stand-up girl, and love each other.
Yeah, and I think discipline and commitment are the threads of DNA that run through that, and vulnerability, because I think the more that you can be aware of your vulnerabilities, the more you can expose them, work on them, and improve. Come on,
well, man up. I don't hear any of that talk anymore. I'm getting busy. Oh, right. Move on.
There's the caricature.
That was
internet.
Toxic masculinity right there, wasn't it?
No. Right.
That was your number 3.
That was my number 3.
Where to go from there?
No, yeah, it's a big topic actually, and whilst we've been a bit flippant and tried to be a bit superficial there, because it's obviously an entire discussion in and of itself, but also I want to make crystal clear that I don't want to. We don't want to make it seem like our opinions on these are in any way gospel or beware the false prophets is kind of what I keep coming back to here is don't, if you're looking for heroes online or somebody to sort of align yourself with, then there might be some internal work to do first and foremost. And that's a fantastic opportunity because that is a vulnerability that can be exposed, which means that you can work harder on it with emotional awareness, move yourself forwards and become your own hero. Hopefully that rounds things off. And you can move on to number 4.
Yeah.
Or actually, do we just call it there?
I think we could call it, because you know what? It crossed my mind, even when you were kind of summarising your point previously. I think we do call it there, because I think we've kind of, in a lot of things, we're encapsulating a lot of things that you just said. And you summarized it a minute ago, talking about allowing yourself to be vulnerable, accepting the beauty and the power in being vulnerable. And you know, I talk about fear. We can look at any different podcast for that, and all these different things. It doesn't matter, man, woman, whatever it be. We know what these fundamental tenets of being a good human are, and we know that we often get them wrong. They bleed into some of the choices we make, and they then bleed into some of the ways that we look at things and some of the ways that we look at ourselves, which kind of brings us back to points 1 and 2 that we both had, which was not really identifying your own situation and falling into traps and all the rest of it. So I think we've kind of covered off quite a lot of things that lean and fall back into the same category, which is just that little bit of self-reflection, an awareness of self, and an ability to lean into your friendship group, your community, your loved ones, and ask them to help you self-reflect. I think coaching comes along with that, but that's something that good relationships should have in them as well. I think all that comes back into your last point, which is, you know, you can dress it up whichever way you like, hashtag whatever, but we're saying be your own hero, but, you know, you can have subtitles and sub text to that could go on forever, but I do think that's better than dragging out number 4 and 5.
Yeah, no, agreed. I think we've made the point clear, but I think along the way we've opened up there's some things that I've sort of openly considered and thought about right now that I maybe hadn't thought about too much recently, because this was ad hoc. I think I'd probably like to return to this topic a bit better prepared.
Yeah.
So for anyone listening that thinks, oh, I disagree with what you said there, then one, please be aware that we've sort of ad hoc this and we're having an open discussion amongst ourselves.
Sorry, mate, interrupt you. There's a nice podcast moment, isn't there? Is that, you know, you can comment on these on the various medium that you're using it and watching it on. If you want us to dig a bit deeper and sort of lean into this a little bit and talk about it a bit further, we would be happy to maybe take a couple of whiskeys, because that's manly, and do that kind of thing. But yeah, I'd be happy to talk further. I think being ad hoc about it means that we probably aren't really covering off what you know, you can come away from these things and say, oh, I wish I'd said such and such, or, you know, or I don't think I elucidated on that point properly, blah, blah, blah. So we can come back to it if you wanted to. Equally, if you don't, put a message in saying, no, you know, you're not the right people for this, bugger off. Yeah, and then we'll definitely do it.
No, I'm just keen to flag that, I don't, there's no part of me that wants to offend anyone or point fingers at anyone in any of that, because we all have our own take on things.
I'm quite happy to offend a few people.
You know what, I am too. If there's,
you know who you are.
If there's, there's certain negative manifestations of the sort of man up culture that you've flippantly referred to just there that I would actively fight against, because it was very damaging for me personally. So I would actively fight against that. But I think in general terms at the moment, I just think the internet is a dangerous place to be from an identity point of view. But speaking from our experience and speaking from the experience of people in our ecosystem, the semantics don't matter as much as the action of the individual. And I think that's why I was probably more waffly there than I otherwise would be, because I'm conscious of not wanting to attack anyone individually or any groups or anything like that. Definitely not. But essentially, be your own hero. Don't be an arsehole. Look after yourself emotionally and physically, and embrace your vulnerabilities, because they'll make you better. And I think that's kind of my ethos for existence wrapped into one. And whatever the definition or waffle about masculinity and media definition of toxicity along the way was brought up isn't relevant, because if we boil it down to the simple things, which is those sort of elements there, then they've made me happier looking at things that binary.
Yep.
So yeah, wow, what an absolute roller coaster of nothingness that was. I hope that's been, I'm not going to say informative, I hope that's been entertaining, because I feel like that was definitely a different angle. But maybe there's
quite a few emotions there, I think.
Yeah, that was that was weird. Yeah,
started off,
there was a lot
ridiculous.
Of
ended up in the middle of the road there. It became relatively retrospective.
For anyone new around here, this is not what these podcasts are normally like.
It is though, isn't
is it?
Because I haven't been here for a few. Now I'm back. I'm ruining it again.
Yeah,
which
you
is
are.
What people want. Actually, that's what the people want.
Well, tell us if that's what you want.
I've had a few private messages saying, Johnny, please come back and start ruining the podcast. So that's, you're welcome.
Well, you've been very successful. Very successful. So anyway, we would actually genuinely love your feedback on the discussion from today, because it's been quite different and made up as we go along. And again, this is just two strangers on the internet talking shite in a podcast studio. Yeah. So if you have no comments at all, that's fine. But that's that. That is another podcast episode done. Please do make sure to hit follow or subscribe, rate and or review, and appreciate the nuance of all these conversations, because we like to view things as broadly and contextually as we can, as we are privileged to have a wide pool of resources with all of our athletes all over the world, and we are very thankful. We are very thankful to all of them. And if you would like to get involved, then please do check out the website. If you are looking for more educational content and less silliness, then head to Omnia Performance Premium on the link in our bio on Instagram, or available via the website as well, and you can get involved there. But that is that. That was interesting. A roller coaster, some good points made, some bad points made, a lot of waffle, and
some personal insults.
Yeah. The usual, a regular Wednesday. Anyway, thank you very much for listening, and see you next time.
Goodbye now.